Hello, everyone, and welcome to TBR's Future Friday, TBR 2015 Predictions, a series of thought leadership webinars being held each Friday between January 16th and February 13th, 2015. Each Friday, TBR's research teams will share predictions for 2015 and beyond across the hardware, software, cloud, security, devices, professional services, telecom, and digital markets. Top TBR analysts will address the trends, drivers, and the business outcomes they predict will occur throughout the year. The Future Friday webinar series stakes out the status, changes, and key market directions. Before we start, there are a few housekeeping items I'd like to cover. First, we will be recording today's session and posting it on our YouTube site, TBRI channel. We encourage you to visit our channel to watch this presentation or any of the others we've posted. Second, we'd like to hear your opinions and thoughts on the material we're presenting. Please send any questions or comments through the Q&A or chat functions. The presenters will address them at the end of the session, or if you'd like to set up a client inquiry for more detailed discussion, please reach out directly, and at the end of the session, we'll set up that call. Third, we'll send out the slides to everyone registered for today's webcast within 24 hours of the conclusion of the webinar. You can also find the slides, as well as our thought leadership pieces, other webinars, and commentaries on SlideShare. And I will post the web address in the chat function during the presentation today. My name is Stuart Williams. I'm the Vice President of Research here at Technology Business Research. And I'll be moderating today's webinar and leading our our predictions webinar for devices and platforms is Ezra Gottheil, who's the principal analyst and practice lead for our devices and platforms practice. Next slide. Okay. So after 7 years of explosive growth in smartphones and tablets and 2 years of precipitous declines in PCs, the market for computing devices has stabilized. TBR expects activity for those form factors to remain the same as in the past year. Slow growth in the PCs, faster growth in smartphone units, combined with a drop in ASPs and a reduction in sales of tablets. At the same time, the ongoing growth of the Internet of Things, which has been going on for at least a decade, will accelerate. Given this overall trend, TBR has developed 3 different types of predictions. The first falls into trends that will continue into 2015. These are current trends TBR expects will continue or accelerate in the coming year. New trends for 2015. These are maturing, nascent trends from 2014 that TBR believes will expand in 2015. And longer-term trends. These trends are opportunities that TBR believes will begin in 2015, but will not have full effect on the industry for several years. Now that I've set the stage, let me hand the call off to Ezra.
Thank you, Stuart. So the 2 topics we'll be discussing under continuing trends are the consumer Internet of Things and voice-based pseudo-natural language interfaces, otherwise known as Siri, Google Voice Search, Cortana, and their friends. The reason that these fall under the major market calms down is that in a world where those markets are beginning to stabilize, the potential for growth of revenue and growth of utilization lies in these two new things. Then we go on to transparency and device pricing, which is primarily in mobile devices, but also seems to be extending all the way to PCs, where there's a separation in pricing between the network operation and the devices, or the operating system and the devices, at least a potential one, and the growth of good enough devices affecting the ASPs of device sales. And finally, looking forward, we see Microsoft will continue to thrive, but its total dominance of the device business, or at least the PC business, is being eroded at the edges, primarily by Chromebook, and in communication by some attempts to come up with a new platform for communication, collaboration, and content management. So let's begin with the Internet of Things, the consumer device Internet of Things. There were literally thousands of consumer device offerings at CES this year, and my colleague Jack Narcotta reported on some of them, and you'll be seeing a description, an event description of those devices. Nevertheless, we do not see enormous industry changing growth coming in the next few years. One of the things that's going to happen is that each one of these devices has its own market and its own value proposition. So what you're looking at is not one large potential market, but a collection of mostly small potential markets. This kind of market has been described as a popcorn market. The other thing is that in many cases what we're looking at is the addition of connectivity to existing classes of devices. And here we see the driver for this modest adoption rate being the lack of killer apps. The killer app is the kind of thing that can drive adoption of an entirely new device. We've seen that happen with fitness trackers, but fitness trackers are frankly kind of a small business relative to the kinds of businesses we've gotten used to in the device business. So the primary result of this continued growth, and we think the growth will continue well beyond this coming year, is that the impact, the revenue impact of these devices will be relatively small. This is especially true among the current device vendors, because since these are separate devices sold to separate markets, often through separate channels with separate applications and separate value propositions, there's no reason to think that the current device vendors, the PC, smartphone, and tablet vendors, have a particularly advantageous position in this market. And you will see third parties, you will see vendors in other lines of business, the way Honeywell has been exploiting connected thermostats, taking some of this additional revenue that's going to come from the introduction of consumer Internet of Things devices. The one place where we could see a big surge in purchasing is in healthcare-related devices, and by this we mean something more than mere fitness trackers. There is a huge industry focused on the cost of maintaining health, not just of delivering healthcare, but of actually reducing the demand for healthcare by maintaining health. And if that industry begins to drive the adoption of Internet of Things devices, you could see a surge in healthcare devices that were being subsidized or rewarded or even distributed by healthcare insurers. There is a small insurer in New York State that actually does help you pay for your Fitbit if you continue to get a certain number of steps. But we think that a larger initiative will be necessary, and we think that step counting is not sufficient to drive this kind of change. However, ongoing monitoring of heart rate or especially blood pressure would prove a major driver here for a surge in adoption of wearable IoT devices. As I was saying, with these devices being sold into different markets with different value propositions, different benefits through different channels, we're going to see a lot of new vendors entering the market. Now, one of the things that's true about this is that there's not an enormous first mover advantage. If a particular kind of device enters the market, it garners a certain amount of attention to the first mover, but unless there's a real strategic advantage or intellectual property involved, there is still room for established vendors to enter the market, and they can claim some synergies with devices they've already sold. So we see a growth in the market based on Internet of Things devices. We don't see a lot of great advantages accruing to either outside vendors or current vendors by being first movers, and we see a real potential for building up loyalty to a suite of devices. This is an approach that Samsung is looking for with its Samsung Hub for a collection of devices. It is a hub for Samsung-branded devices where Samsung has a major entrant. That includes a lot of the appliances. And third parties are also being supported by the hub, where Samsung is not a major competitor and is willing to allow third parties to enter onto its platform. The next thing we want to talk about is voice-based pseudo-natural language interfaces. And that is an enormous mouthful, and you will see that I'm going to make a case for an acronym for it. These first were received attention with the introduction of Siri in 2012, but Google Voice Search actually had existed before that as a telephone service, and now Microsoft has come in full speed ahead with Cortana on multiple platforms. Amazon has voice commands for its Fire TV and for its Echo device, and we believe there's enormous potential here, particularly in linking these devices to enterprise applications. The driver for this growth, we believe, is that the voice interface, or actually the pseudo-natural language interface, whether it's entered through a keyboard or entered through a microphone, is superior for many interactions. Just think about entering an appointment into a either mobile device or a PC. Even with years and years of trying to refine the appointment entering interface, there's still about 6 things that have to be entered to make an appointment. That's far more work for the user than simply saying, I'll have lunch with Stuart tomorrow at Boca Grande. The results of this will be an increasing role of mobile devices, especially in enterprise. So, if you can speak into a device and have a query entered into an enterprise system, you have a far higher utilization rate of the enterprise system. You also lower the barriers to using it. That is to say, people with less technical expertise can actually query the enterprise system. This, in turn, creates greater value in the enterprise for their enterprise system, and therefore inclines the enterprise to purchase or support mobile devices that can access this system. We see this as an upside across the board. We've got 2 efforts that are going on here. One has nothing to do with pseudo-natural language, and that's the IBM-Apple collaboration on mobile applications connected to enterprise systems. And the other is Microsoft announcing that Cortana, that Dynamic CRM will be enabled for Cortana, its pseudo-natural language interface, starting with the 2015 edition, which actually came out late in 2014. Now, Apple and IBM both actually have pseudo-natural language interfaces. We first saw one of them when Watson won Jeopardy. That's not the bulk of what Watson does. Watson has got a huge back end. It's not about generating a reasonable command. It's about finding the best answer to difficult questions. But the interface is there, and we fully expect Apple and or IBM to begin to integrate these. We also expect other vendors to do it. The potential here for growth in utilization, value, and therefore revenue and profit for the industry is huge. Where there's an advantage for the pseudo-natural language interface is with dealing with long lists of possible entries into a query or into a command. And you can see it in making an appointment simply by saying, who is the appointment with and where will it take place? And those are key problems in prescribing an interface to an enterprise system, be it a BI system, a CRM system, or an ERP system. Now, this isn't going to displace more intricate queries and more sophisticated display of results. But if you can query the database and get a quick answer about sales or inventory or trends, you will see a lot more business people using and relying on the enterprise system. Those are the kinds of applications where queries are entered with a lot of names of things. They can be names of customers, names of products, names of regions, names of stores, and that's where voice really can come to play a role. So it's not a great acronym, and I'm not holding on to it terribly vigorously, but I'm tired of calling them pseudo-natural language interfaces. I want to say that it's not just voice. Typed entry works, and it's not just personal assistance like Cortana or Siri. Google Now, which is a personal assistant, is not voice-enabled. What's voice-enabled on the Google platform is Google Search. Those two categories have been confused, but the key takeaway here is this interpreter that allows people to phrase their commands in different orders, use synonyms and nicknames, and basically have the system check back with them to make sure before they dial that phone or enter that query or enter that transaction, but allow them to have interactions with computer systems with a much lower level of effort. That increases the use, that increases the value, and that increases the potential revenue. Let's move on and talk about new trends. Now, what's been happening in both PCs and mobile devices is a spreading apart of costs in the device. PCs are bundled with the cost of the price of the operating system in them, and they continue to be so. And it is not clear whether Microsoft is going to break these apart. The Microsoft Chief Operating Officer, Kevin Turner, implied that they were, but the announcements made yesterday about Windows 10 kind of implied that Windows 10 comes priced into the price of a device, and if you buy two devices, you end up paying for Windows 10 twice. Now, if this does get broken apart, this is really good news for the device vendors, and I think for the users. The driver here is threats from non-Windows operating systems, like mostly things from Google, Chrome, and Android. And the results would be protecting the Windows base, but resulting in lower revenue. Now, what Kevin Turner seemed to be implying last month was that the licensing would be on a user base instead of a device base, and that the revenue would be affiliated with services, which to my mind implies a subscription, a fee that's paid on a periodic basis. That is something that I think users and buyers could live with. It seems reasonable that if you work at several different devices, they all have the same operating system. You pay on a yearly basis for the utilization of those devices and the updates and all that. But having them be one price for your use wherever on whatever device really simplifies things, because however much we try, we find it extremely hard to use devices actually exactly at the same time. So what this does is it enables multiple device sales. You can have different form factors. The other enablers for multiple device sales are the synchronization cloud backup services, so that basically switching from device to device is trivial, and we've seen Microsoft put that into Windows 10. We saw Apple put that into OS X and iOS, and the ability to have multiple devices, all of which have constant knowledge of you, your state, and your data, means that you can sell multiple devices, and you don't have to have a compromise. You can have a small device for being portable, a large device for giving you large screen size. You can have a tablet by your bedside and a tablet on the coffee table and a tablet in your briefcase. That's good news for device vendors, and frankly, the prices on these devices are going down so fast, I think many purchasers would want them. In the case of enterprise, the value that can be delivered through additional devices is substantial if you lower the incremental price of these devices. If you increase the actual breadth of utilization and potential value of your database, of your enterprise systems, by making them accessible from more places at more times, you would pay something for that. But if you lower the price so you're not paying the same vendor for another version of the operating system, you can increase the number of sales of those, and you can increase the sales of the enterprise systems and supporting services. It seems that services will be largely the way that additional devices will be monetized. This would promote device proliferation, and I think that with the availability of increasingly capable low-end devices is the direction we want to head. Certainly device vendors want to head, and users want to head, because it's no longer an enormous barrier to switching from device to device. Our next prediction involves much the same thing. good enough smartphones, and we've seen that happening also in PCs, which is to say that through a combination of increases in processor capacity and decreases in price for higher end processors, for memory, improvements in batteries, and just the volume of these devices are out there driving down the prices for all the components, we end up in a situation where you can have a very competent smartphone at a very low price. Now, the other thing that's happening is that in markets where the price of the smartphone was masked by the data service, these things are being broken apart. And the big one of those, of course, is the United States, where increasingly even the high-end vendors that typically sold subsidized the price of a smartphone in the region for a high-end one in the region of $450 in exchange for a 2-year contract, are making that deal explicit, so that at the end of the payment period, whatever you choose, the amount you're sending to the data provider decreases. This means that users are no longer incentivized to change to a new smartphone every 2 years, and in fact, they're no longer incentivized to might as well buy a big one. A high-end one. It costs just as much as a low-end one, and that opens up the market to good enough smartphones. That's been a very powerful growth strategy for Motorola or Motorola Mobility over the last year, and we see that increasing. The lower-end $100 to $200 smartphones are incredibly capable, and if the buyer can save money by buying one, an increasing number of them will. What this is going to do, of course, is drive lower ASPs and lower margins, and the obvious main suffering company in this trend is Samsung. This is a lot, Samsung has lost sales and unit sales. Its ASPs have crashed, and its margins have crashed, because even if you stay in the Samsung family, you no longer see the reason to buy the highest end phone. One of the things this will drive, because you're now buying the phone separately from the subsidization plan, is longer life cycles. So not only are you getting lower ASPs and margins, but you're actually selling few phones into the replacement market, and in saturated mature markets, that's about all there is. Even Apple is going to be affected by this change. Apple is not going to be a good enough phone near the bottom tier of the market, but it is definitely going to be challenged to only have extremely high-end premium phones, as it has in emerging markets. And we expect Apple, as it has done in other markets, to bring down its entry prices and to sell on the basis of extended life cycles and support of extended life cycles. What this is going to do to Apple is it's going to result in overall corporate margins going down. It's still going to be a very profitable company. It's going to be a very profitable business. But frankly, the margins it has sustained on smartphones since the availability of the iPhone, now 8 years ago, was something that I don't think Apple thought would last that long, and I certainly didn't. What this also can lead to, potentially, again, is multiple devices. However, this requires a changeover by the network providers. Whether a business arrangement can be made where it's to the advantage of the network providers to have multiple phones, and certainly the device providers will accommodate that with the necessary capacity, remains to be seen. I think this is actually to their benefit. They will predictably charge some additional fee for supporting multiple phones transparently, but if that fee is low enough, I think you can see people having different phones for different uses, and a reemergence of the business phone versus the personal phone. Let's go on to longer-term trends. Microsoft is in a good state in the market. It has lots of upsides. It's always going to be relevant, or for the foreseeable future, it's going to be relevant. It's made major plays in Internet of Things. We think they're doing a lot of things extremely well, but you don't get to keep a monopoly forever, and Microsoft's virtual monopoly on PC operating systems is certainly begun to be eroded, and we think will continue to be eroded. So one of the things we believe is that Chromebook that has been almost exclusively an educational play with some entrance into the consumer market will continue what little progress it has made in the enterprise market. This is going to be slow, and it's going to be at the margins for a very long time. But we think that the ultimate outcome is going to be Chromebook is going to be a presence in a lot of companies, and it's going to result in two-tier PC distribution in larger companies. The driver is Chromebook's low TCO. Basically, it's not simply the price of the device itself, but being a kind of user-friendly thin client, it's easy to maintain, it's easy to support, and it just really is a less expensive device. It's very transparent about how to use it because it basically is a browser and only a browser. And the results, we think, is a two-tier distribution where content creators get full-fledged Windows machines with a full-fledged version of Office. And the many people in business who are largely content consumers will get Chromebooks. Microsoft has been reacting to this threat. It lowered the licensing prices on lower-end PCs to a very low price. It's certainly responding to some of the problems in their operating system, and we believe they'll respond to problems in their Office suite. But still, there's an appeal here to it's just a browser, and we think it will spread from schools to students to consumers to healthcare to some retail, some hospitality industries. The key here, I think, is Outlook Exchange. Outlook Exchange is what locks businesses into the full-fledged Windows platform. But Outlook Exchange is very vulnerable. It's a really old system. It's a resource hog. It's expensive to maintain. It breaks down frequently. In many cases, users are much happier with Gmail, and meanwhile, Google is working very, very hard at making Gmail more usable inside the enterprise. What you get is top management who use Gmail for their personal mail and Outlook Exchange for their business mail, asking why Outlook Exchange can't be as user-friendly as Gmail. One of the major barriers to adopting Chromebooks and adopting Gmail is the hosting. Basically, most companies, for very good reasons, don't want all their data to be hosted in Google in a multi-tenant architecture. Email is a critical asset, and there's also governance and government restrictions that prevent that from happening. We believe that Google is looking to find a way to allow there to be hosting of its hosted applications, Gmail, Google Apps, etc., either on-premise or by third parties, getting over this barrier of further distributing both Gmail and Google Apps. Finally, let's talk about post-email communication, collaboration, and content sharing. Email itself, including Gmail, has been burdened with a lot more than the simple sending of mail messages. And for many, many users in many, many businesses, it's become not a productivity enhancer, but a productivity eroder. The messages come in too fast. Frequently they're used for a good deal more than simply sending a message. They're used for actually data storage and access. They're used for other kinds of exchanges. They're used for to-do lists. And the email platform by itself is basically outmoded. This is something that IBM addressed with its announcement about Verse. So that we believe the old systems are basically collapsing. Systems collapse in large part because they're so helpful that people use them until they can't work anymore, but that's what's happening. And the result is that new systems emerge. And people working together need a system that provides for communication along a bunch of different modalities, collaboration, working together on projects, and sharing of content. In most businesses, there's an awful lot of of multiple copies of files attached to email that shouldn't be. They should not be many copies, clogging up the email system, clogging up each individual's computers, and getting out of sync. This is the basis of IBM's first initiative. Frankly, I'm pessimistic about them being able to reinvent the system. That kind of imaginative software design has not been something that IBM has done in the past. However, they are very well positioned to make acquisitions in that space if a startup should emerge with a good solution. Google is going after this with Gmail plus some of its other things, and one of the things that it's going after it with is Google+. That's why I put it here. Google+ was brought out as a Facebook killer. I don't think it was a good Facebook killer, and I don't think it was a position to be sought after in any case. However, it has a pretty good access control metaphor. It has a pretty good architecture, and it would be a good way to handle communication, collaboration, content sharing between what's built into Plus, what's built into Hangouts, which was originally a part of Plus, what's built into Google Voice, and what's built into Gmail. There's a potential here for building one of these systems. Google hasn't really succeeded with large, elaborate applications. They tend to win better with simpler applications that evolve. But it is possible that something will come out of Google that will do it. Microsoft has also shown some awareness that its platform, Outlook Exchange, has its limitations, and Yammer acquisition was one of those. They've also recently acquired an email client. However, Microsoft, in addition to facing the same daunting design challenge, also faces the need to be able to make a smooth transition between its humongous installed base, incredibly valuable installed base of Outlook users, and some future system. I don't know who's going to emerge as the winner. I think Google is probably got the best pieces and the best sense of design of the three of these companies. However, something might come out of the startup world and be snatched up by any company, including any of these three. So at this point, we reach the end of our major presentation, and I'd like to ask if there are any questions. How are we doing on time? If we end up with time, I've got some other, one-off single sentence predictions to share. But let's ask. Questions?
So if you have questions, please type them in, submit them via the chat function, and we'll make sure that we get those submitted to Ezra. Yep. So here's a question. What about security on mobile devices? That's been an inhibitor to corporate adoption of certain devices.
I think that the security problem will be solved probably in hardware. I think Samsung is, they tried Knox, and Knox proved to have flaws in it, but Samsung is emphasizing security, and it almost and certainly will be a hardware-based security system as a major part of its initiative. And then Intel, a major competitor of Samsung in both the mobile device and IoT world, is working there. I'm not sure, actually, how much that has been an inhibitor. I think the inhibitor on corporate adoption, for the most part, has been the lack of a killer app. I think that the security industry, which is an insurance sale, you wouldn't want anything to happen to your data, always emphasizes the threat. And this year they transitioned from trying to scare people with BYOD to trying to scare people with IoT. But I think, frankly, the reason that most companies haven't embraced mobile devices is the applications that are available are basically PC applications on a mobile device.
Okay, Ezra. Sticking with kind of the hardware-based questions, here's another one. Form factor is also an issue. People want small devices and large screens. Any thoughts on how this will be addressed? Hologram technology. This is This is what's called a leading question?
Well, I've actually been waiting for an inflatable monitor for many, many years. Let me say something about hologram technology, which is what Microsoft demonstrated yesterday looked to be an awesome virtual reality system. What makes it a holographic system is that the virtual reality system integrates the current real environment with the virtual environment. And frankly, I don't find a lot of compelling applications for that. So this is great for gaming, and it's great for enhancing Microsoft's reputation. I have no doubt that there'll be a lot of great derivative work coming out of the awesome technology, but I can't see people sitting at their desks wearing elaborate headsets and waving their arms in space. So I don't think so.
This is Stuart Williams. Ezra and I often have a lot of conversations around the evolution of user interfaces with technology, and he talked about that with the pseudo-natural language. That's one type of interface with systems. Obviously, the screen or the head-mounted virtual reality display is another one. There's also refinements in having the system understand where you were at in space, particularly your hands or your fingers. A lot of sensor technology. We're right on the beginning of I think, an explosive exploration of how those can come together in novel ways, right? So your non-standard technology area will probably be the one where you have the most impact, with doctors in ER rooms, people who are out in the field doing activities, farmers, other people who need to see data layered on in an environment where they can't hold a handheld device or they can't interact with a PC or traditional form factor. So I think there's a lot of areas to be explored here that begin to tie the user back into the applications that run back in the data center. So here's another question. My broader corporate feedback from customers says that there is very little desire to move off of Office and Outlook, and the collaborative glue in these apps is hard to beat. Definitely not Gmail or such apps. How broad is the Google business usage today, really?
It's really small. I mean, apart from schools where there are enormous advantages to it, it's not merely prices. It's just a tremendous winner in schools. It's small, and I have no doubt that the potential of changing what is really the most used application in almost any environment, which is email, and taking that out and putting in a new one makes a lot of IT people say, not until I retire. Nevertheless, I hear from a lot of users that say, I wicked hate Outlook. So I don't think you hear it from IT people, but I think you do hear it from users. And I think this is, there are several obstacles to overcome. But frankly, I don't think that the Outlook and Outlook collaboration system is long-term viable. It may not be a Gmail/Google Plus based solution, but I don't think that this can continue indefinitely. It's a long transition.
Yeah, I think that those are elements of not necessarily what's delivered to the user, but the way the functions of the applications are integrated back in the data center. For example, in Outlook, it does email. We have scheduling. We have separate applications that do collaboration, Link and SharePoint to talk to Microsoft, right? So people don't necessarily work in those functional silos. They want to work using what those applications do horizontally, and they want to. They need to track their utilization. There's a lot of other business functions and team-related and project-related functions. So we see cloud-related applications like Basecamp and Asana trying to, disaggregate the messaging and communication applications. Not that it's not an email per se, but it's put in the context of a separate function or a project. So there are people pushing the forefront of this, and I think a lot of that comes from the fact that these siloed functions, while it's easy for IT to manage, are difficult for the end users to do their job. And there is a new style of work that people are asking for a solution. There's no silver bullet here, though. So let me see, we can continue to have a couple more questions. Ezra, I think you had another slide that talked about a couple of things.
Okay, I see one more question.
Okay, yep.
Which is, I wasn't referring to hologram technology from an interactive perspective for business use, more from a projection and input use. So it seems like you're asking, is there a different kind of display technology that's available, and that maybe projection might do it, maybe wearing glasses might do it. And I think in specialized environments, that pays off. I think what you're seeing is the decrease in cost for large stationary displays being immense, and that what you're seeing is that if you have a mobile device, it will drop into a dock, or even have a wireless dock, and it will use the acreage around you. The problems with projection is you need big clean white space to project onto, and you might, that's almost as expensive as a really good screen at this point.
Yep.
So that's what I think is happening, is that the monitors are going to be everywhere. There's a big one at the foot of your bed in your hotel room, and so on. And the devices will be small.
Yep. So we have a couple minutes left. I know that Ezra's prepared a couple of extra predictions. If you want to touch on those before we wrap up.
I'll go through them really fast. This is boring but true. PC unit sales will continue to grow, and margins will remain stable among leaders. Revenues, more of a problem because of ASP erosion. But basically, we've gotten over the tablets are going to take over the world, and PCs are dead phase, and we're basically saying, an awful lot of people have to spend an awful lot of time with two hands on the keyboard and so on, and recognizing the value of PCs. PC life cycles extended. That was the main reason for the drop. I believe they will continue to extend, but less precipitously going forward. And PC vendors will look for ways to form longer-term relationships with their customers, deliver services, gain margins, and create loyalty to the brand, recognizing the length of the life cycles of these products. And the same thing's going to happen with tablets and smartphones ASP, and I mentioned that with respect to smartphones. Online productivity platforms. This is a term that Microsoft came up with last year to kind of get around and deal with some of the problems with it dividing its world between consumers and commercial, but rather saying everybody has to do productivity things as well as consume content. Office in its various manifestations, including its online manifestation, is a major player, as is Google Apps. Apple has one. It's not clear where that's going to go, but for most uses, except when you're doing really heavy-duty use, having your presentation spreadsheet document in the cloud, available from anything at any time, available for collaboration and sharing, is the way to go, and providing enough additional value to justify a subscription around that, on top of the very ample capabilities that are offered for free, is a challenge facing all of these companies. Apple, Google, and Microsoft will consolidate their cross-device IoT positions, and Samsung, Intel, and Cisco will progress in that category. So if each IoT application device is a single market coming from, at first, a single vendor and needing to make its own market and things like that, the early term winners are those that support multiple IoT devices. And Apple and Google and Microsoft through Azure, the enabling of Azure for IoT, have staked out a good lead in this department, while Intel and Cisco have made a lot of progress, and Samsung has made some very provocative announcements, and it will commit to itself. Of course, Samsung has several advantages in that field, making not only many end-user consumer products that can become things on the internet, and most have, but also making many of the components, which is one of the reasons I think hardware solution to security will be coming out of there. And Chromebook, I mentioned commercial. That's a steeper hill to climb. But as a secondary device, Chromebook will make greater gains in the consumer market. Remember that Apple kept itself alive by winning over the hearts and minds of kids in schools and then they came out of schools and bought them for themselves. I think Chromebook is going to have a similar history. Longer term, devices as service models will gain traction in SMB and consumer markets. Basically, what people want is not things. What they want is the service that those things deliver. And they will pay for assurance that their device will be, the service will be available, will be explained to them, their problems will be solved, there's a safety net under which they're working. That's an explanation for Apple's success, and we believe that the hardware vendors can also succeed by providing a lot of assurance and support for their users. Essentially delivering the device as you have computing for X number, X dollars a month for X number of years. You have communications. 3D printing, I think, is very, very big, but slow growing. I mean, it really depends on improved materials, lower costs, faster speeds, all those kinds of things. But ultimately, the idea of being able to produce a customized device at a remote location is an incredibly big winner. And it goes through a lot of transitions where you use service bureaus, you have places where you can have something created for you, and then eventually they become inexpensive enough to be located first in businesses and then in homes. But it's going to take some time, and HP, because of its distribution network, apart from its technology where it has some real benefits, but because of its relationship to printers and printing supplies, has a distribution network that's already set up. So this is very big for HP, and particularly for the part of HP that the devices part of HP Inc. that will continue to house 3D printing. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you all very much.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Ezra, for your predictions and for sharing them with the folks on the line today. You can follow Ezra and TBR on Twitter. Very easy to find him. And please check out our pages on SlideShare and YouTube. Before you sign off, I'd like to ask you to take a brief survey about today's webinar. As we research the performance of technology companies, we're also studying how we're helping our clients, and your feedback would be greatly appreciated. Again, we'll be sharing this, the deck of the presentation within 24 hours and making the recording available on YouTube for those who want to go to the TBRI channel. Thank you very much. Next week, we have 2 more Future Fridays predictions that will be coming up, so I hope that you can join us then. Have a great weekend.